Germany's interior minister held a special press conference to commemorate the end of her time in office, at which she boasted about her ministry's performance under her leadership. While speaking to reporters about the situation regarding illegal immigration, she was asked about relations with Poland, specifically how she views the Polish government's declaration that Poland will stop accepting any illegal immigrants. You talk about good cooperation with the Polish authorities, but looking at the situation in Poland and the discussion that has ended, and that the Polish Prime Minister wants to suspend asylum law, we see the opposite. What will happen if Poland actually stops accepting these pushbacks? You rightly point out that actual deportation detentions without arrangements will not work. The Polish Prime Minister actually said that is true. However, we must distinguish between Poland's actions internally and at the external European Union border. I want to explain this again in detail because it's very important. On our border with Poland, we have joint investigation groups. Polish officers cooperate with German officers in joint units. This works very well. Otherwise, we wouldn't have such great statistics. It seemed that the German minister didn't fully understand the question, hence the journalist inquired further. But there is a discussion in Poland about pushbacks from Germany. The Polish government also opposes them. What will happen when such a situation actually occurs at the border? Isn't this bad news for the European system? That's why I said that. I'm glad that we agreed that the detention for deportation is to be done in consultation with our neighbors. A very important point. But what does this mean exactly? That Poland can say what they want, but the arrangements are what they are, and it is Berlin that ultimately decides. Thus, either the Polish side or the German side must be lying. The whole world knows that illegal immigration is incredibly harmful. The United States sends them back to Mexico or El Salvador, and it costs them a lot. But they do it anyway, because it is worth it. The Germans, on the other hand, deportations cost them nothing, because they send them to Poland. What's more, it happens that Polish authorities themselves pick up these illegal immigrants, which sounds bizarre. But it is true. According to the findings of the news agency Niezależna, the Polish border guard, in cooperation with German services, brings migrants expelled from Germany into Poland. There have also been cases of German police cars crossing over the border on their own and dropping off unwanted foreigners on the Polish side of the border. Foreigners transferred by German services to Poland under the Dublin Agreements and readmission agreements are picked up by officers at designated locations on both sides of the border, including at joint Polish-German facilities, including those on the German side of the border. Thus, the ruling Polish government's narrative encounters an internal contradiction. On the one hand, it claims that the Polish-Belarusian border is secure. On the other hand, it agrees to pushbacks from Germany of migrants who, according to Berlin, enter the EU through Poland. Tusk seems to have made a commitment to Berlin that he would be amenable, and Berlin supported him very strongly in gaining power in Poland. Recently, at the Belarusian border, he said, "Now the Belarus-Poland border is 100% sealed. If we don't let anyone through our eastern border, who are the Germans sending us on our western border?" As such, it is not clear whether anyone is actually verifying the country of entry of illegal immigrants, whether they cross the border in Poland or in the Baltic countries or via the Balkan route. There may be more than 1 million illegal immigrants in Germany today. According to the outgoing government's plans, at least 200,000 were to be expelled. The new German government is expected to have even more ambitious plans.
International relations, geopolitics, as well as tariffs, taxes, and duties are becoming a major element of the election campaign in Poland. Which of Poland's presidential candidates, since they are all vying for the votes of businessmen, will manage to win the votes of the majority of Poles? Today, I took a closer look at the situation. The last 24 hours have caused panic in Rafał Trzaskowski's staff. How to comment on U.S. tariffs on Europe without coming off as too anti-American. We have to do both. That is, on the one hand, strengthen our alliance with the United States, and on the other hand, strengthen the European Union and its ability to act effectively on the international stage. Although Rafał Trzaskowski is leading in the polls, this is a presidential campaign, which of course I am running. This represents the ruling option, which has increasingly lower ratings among Poles. For many voters, the May presidential election may be a referendum of sorts, assessing the quality of Donald Tusk's rule. Not surprisingly, even coalition partners are giving Karol Nawrocki a better chance. Why? My intuition tells me that today the favorite in this election is Nawrocki. If the second round of elections is structured around a conventional referendum for or against the government, then Rafał Trzaskowski's fate is regrettable. The government is unpopular today, and it will be very difficult to build a victory strategy around such an axis. Karol Nawrocki seems to be more credible, and although the left liberal media are trying very hard to blur this image, the pluses of Karol Nawrocki in the media are seen by the ruling party politicians themselves. In this case, the pretext for the journalist's attack was to be a book by Karol Nawrocki. I have read the book, and it is quite sensible. Why is the book under a pseudonym and not under his own name if there is nothing to be ashamed of? This, in principle, can be also understood. If he was the director of a state entity at the time, he could have been afraid because nevertheless, this figure in the environment of organized crime was quite recognizable. And this sympathy for criminals that we read about in the media? And I don't know if there is sympathy for criminals there. Karol Nawrocki himself is creating a good relationship between politics and business. This is what the Civic Coalition government is increasingly forgetting. Here, at a meeting with Polish and American businessmen, Karol Nawrocki is defending the interests of our country. I am in deep concern that the European Union's retaliatory tariffs will negatively affect Poland's prosperity. First of all, I must say that I am disappointed that we have not been able to build bridges between Poland and the U.S. in this situation while following Donald Trump's campaign. It is I who will become president of Poland, and I want to assure you that I will look at Poland's role in the European Union as a leader in transatlantic relations. Apart from growing support for Sławomir Mencen and his electorate, which largely consists of businessmen, now the main problems for the Civic platform are the promises that Donald Tusk's party has failed to fulfill. Meanwhile, Rafał Trzaskowski says the following. First of all, I am not a member of the government. I was not the one who promised the tax-free amount, while yes, I am positive that the government has clearly announced that this promise will be implemented. This is one of the many unfulfilled promises of the Civic platform. The issue boils down to the fact that candidates promise all sorts of things, and it is known in advance. After all, the electorate knows this, that these promises are not fulfilled, and actually, one does not resent this as much. Probably the issue is to what extent one does not deliver, and in the case of the Civic platform, this principle is significantly violated. But it is with the rule of the Civic platform that Polish people are not satisfied. This is no longer confirmed, not only by Poles, but also by the Civic platform politicians themselves, whose runner-up is none other than Rafał Trzaskowski.
The message about the hacking attack on Civic platform servers appeared in almost all Polish media, with Prime Minister Tusk himself adding to the drama. Cyberattacks on the Civic platform's IT system, foreign interference in the elections has begun. State services point to an Eastern element. One didn't have to wait long for an entrance by Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Digitization, Krzysztof Gawkowski. State services are working intensively in connection with the cybersecurity incident concerning the Civic platform. The case is serious, and we will keep you informed of all the details. Interestingly, as recently as yesterday, the case was presented quite differently, and not so seriously. The media reported on a hacking of the email account of one of the Civic platform's local politicians to send out messages infected with viruses. This is what the head of the CPRM, Jan Grabiec, said about it. The cyber attack consisted of the fact that the email inbox of one of the employees was taken over, and through this an attempt was made to generate a fake message. We have a situation in which some activist had his mailbox hacked. Perhaps it was a simple, common hacking attack resulting from a desire to make money, or perhaps something even more mundane. But they made this, as we can see, a prelude to being able to argue something later about the legitimacy of the election.
Preludium do tego, żeby coś móc później sobie argumentować w kwestii legalności wyborów.
To, co mnie niepokoi bardzo mocno, to natychmiastowe...
What worries me greatly is the immediate inclusion of information about the attack in an attempt to show that Russia is already preparing to destabilize elections. I have the impression that the government is deliberately stirring up emotions in order to move the public debate and perhaps also to carry out actions to lower the credibility of the election result.
Mają obniżyć wiarygodność wyniku wyborczego.
Because everything is reminiscent of the beginning of the events that unfolded recently in Romania, where Russian services allegedly influenced the outcome of the presidential election. In Romania, it turned out that their version of the civic platform was behind the promotion of Colin Georgescu, which promoted him in order to weaken the chances of their right-wing candidate, like Karol Nawrocki. So to say, to make the candidate of the European People's Party, or the equivalent of the civic platform there, win the presidential election.
Wygrał wybory prezydenckie.
The whole issue of alleged Russian influence that the government is alarmed about looks suspicious. Isn't it the case that Donald Tusk is buoyantly examining what can be done within the framework of the presidential elections in Poland, what can be done, and whether this Romanian scenario, maybe also the French, can be repeated in Poland?
Daj Boże.
We asked Tusk coalition participants about the alleged Russian cyber attack and the Romanian scenario. Both Prime Minister Donald Tusk and Deputy Prime Minister Krzysztof Gawkowski explained very precisely what this attack on the IT infrastructure of the civic platform is about. Is this the beginning of the Bucharest scenario? This is not the start of Operation Bucharest in Poland. What kind of Operation Bucharest, Mr. Editor? Today's government does not want to remember the real influence of Russia and the Kremlin-inspired actions that actually influenced the elections in Poland. The eastern element is that in 2023, text messages were hacked and sent against Law and Justice, and all sorts of information was posted on John Botron's Against Law and Justice. The eastern trace is the 8 stars slogan against law and justice, which we now know was inspired by Russian services. The question is whether Tusk coalition, based on alleged Russian influence in the upcoming presidential elections, is not just starting to implement in Poland the scenario that worked in the Romanian elections. We are 46 days into the first round of elections. Some drama is beginning. Evidently, the groundwork is being prepared for the annulment of the elections in Poland, unless these elections are dictated by Civic Platform, unless they are won by Civic Platform Deputy Chairman Rafał Trzaskowski. The changes in the law that the December 13th coalition proposed shortly before the elections also fit into this puzzle. They drafted the statutory changes regarding the law on the Supreme Court, the Chamber of Extraordinary Control on Public Affairs, and for many years they didn't mind that it was that very chamber that decided the validity of the elections. Suddenly, a few months before, they found that it was not the court. What is at stake in the upcoming elections is whether Donald Tusk's coalition will succeed in closing the system and continuing to implement the rules of growling democracy. This one signature of Donald Trump is worth more than hundreds of billions of dollars. That's the kind of money that will soon start flowing to American businesses, workers and their families. At long last, the American economy, as well as its international reputation, are returning to the state they were in before the Joe Biden presidency.
Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. USA.
Liberation Day is not a unilateral measure by Donald Trump. On the contrary, it's a response to the decisions of other countries. Countries that have been draining the pockets of American businesses for years must come to terms with the new rules. America is imposing reciprocal tariffs on products from countries that have previously burdened American goods with their own tariffs.
Industries like automakers and other manufacturers, however, could benefit from the trade protection. We'll just have to see how it all plays out.
The European Union faces 20% tariffs on everything it sells. Products made in China have been subjected to an additional 34% tax, and British products to 10%.
American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago.
The last 4 years of the Democratic administration under Joe Biden have severely hampered the American economy. Heavy industry, on which America was built, ceased to be profitable. Factories in cities and towns collapsed, and people lost their jobs overnight. Donald Trump promised his countrymen that businesses in the United States would start being profitable again, and hardworking Americans would be able to secure their family's income once more. He promised to rebuild the middle class in America, that there would be a resurgence of the kind of industry based not on high-tech specialized knowledge, but that ordinary Americans would be able to do those jobs that decades ago gave whole families their bread and home. Security, economy and family are the pillars of Trump's presidency. Under the Democrats, fuel and electricity prices rose by a third. Now, the quality of life for hardworking Americans may finally improve. America finally has a leader, probably the first since Reagan, who looks out for American interests. Unfortunately, Europe has political mediocrity and lackeys.
Präsident Trump gestern im Rosengarten des Weißen
Left-wing establishment politicians and their media are attacking the American president for protecting his own people. EU officials did not even try to talk to Trump. Brussels deliberately pushed for a trade war with Washington to push American companies and soldiers out of Europe. But the tariffs will hurt manufacturers of German cars, French champagne and Dutch cheese. That's why the head of the European Commission is softening the hitherto aggressive tone.
I agree with President Trump that others are taking unfair advantage of the current rules, and I'm ready to support any efforts to make the global trading system fit for the realities of the global economy. But I also want to be clear. Reaching for tariffs as your first and last tool will not fix it.
But it is the Eurocrats who are primarily responsible for all the regulations hitting EU businesses and workers. This is a group that destroys the European economy and then is surprised that someone protects their own economy. Take, for example, the Green Deal, which burdens the European economy heavily. 3,000 regulations, where in the United States they have 300. They keep fighting with the US side, claiming they will build their own army. These are tall tales. For all the world leaders who will be calling and asking for a removal of tariffs, Donald Trump has one answer. Remove the barriers to trade with America that you yourself have imposed, invest in your own security, then the road to negotiations will be open. For now, Donald Trump's priorities are American families and American businesses. Today, the world's politicians, pointing to him as a culprit for all the problems, should themselves take care of their own countrymen.